Another day, another seizure of smuggled black market cars. This time not in Florida, dun dun dun, but in California. That story is coming up right after the break. Confession, I hate cleaning my own cars. That's why I love Adams Polishes. Whatever you want to clean, polish, or shine, Adams has a specific product just for that, even for matte finishes. Since 2000, Adams Polishes has been offering premium car care products dedicated to the enthusiast. Whether you're a professional detailer or a weekend warrior, their innovative and effective products will enable you to achieve amazing results on your prized possession. Adams, made with pride and passion in the USA. So a story surfaced last week out of a place called Woodland, California, which is up near Sacramento, about 500 miles north of me. There was a link in the story to going to a place called Apple Towing, likely just a regular towing company who happens to have a government-approved vendor status, so they weren't part of it. But Midori's Part Shop posted photos and a short summary of what we were seeing in the picture and what was confiscated. Cars that we saw in the picture, the seized cars, included Silvias, R34s, a Stagea, a couple of Chasers, Aristos, and a JDM Accord Euro R, among others. By my calculation, close to $1 million in cars and street value. It's weird to say street value about cars, right? The pictures show cars with their powertrains removed and placed on a pallet, just as they would be transported in containers for those companies who were illegally importing these things as car parts. Here's a GTR shell. Oh, the motor happens to be on a pallet right in front of it. Nothing shady, nothing to see here. Anyway, they probably didn't pack the thing right, and an X-ray caught the attention of Customs and Border Patrol, so here we are. Once they opened the containers and took a look at the paperwork, they realized they had something there. An investigation ensued, and then the whole thing blew up. Here's a list of the now blacklisted VINs. If you ever choose to buy one of these models of cars, you might want to check that VIN against this list, because if your VIN is on this list, this car cannot come back into the United States. It's now, they won't let it back in, even after the 2024 rule. So don't buy these cars. Those cars going back overseas. Now, these cars were probably confiscated a long time ago, but they were recently put up for auction by the feds. And before you start rambling about how are the feds able to sell illegal cars, let me clear that up. These cars were sold for export only to non-contiguous countries. For those who didn't take geography in school or English in school, or maybe you were just sick that day, the word non-contiguous means not connected to, okay? In plain English, what that means is these cars cannot just be exported to Canada or Mexico. They have to leave the North American continent. That means that the winning bidder will have to sell these cars to other countries like Japan, France, Germany, Spain, or wherever, but not here in North America. The final bid reached $148,000, which is a pretty good deal for $800,000 in cars, right? But not if they have to be shipped far away from the USA and they can never come back because they can never be registered in this country. And if anyone dares to re-import these cars, the feds will probably get wind of it, crush it, and these things are just going to be gone forever. So a pretty good idea not to bring those cars back into the United States. So the question is, how did these cars even get past Customs and Border Patrol in the first place? This simple but scary explanation is that CBP can only inspect about 2% of the cargo containers that come into this country, and there are hundreds of thousands of containers that come in every year. 2%. That's it. Let that sink in. If the notion that a dirty nuclear bomb could be smuggled into the country inside one of the other 98% of uninspected containers, if that doesn't keep you awake at night, it sure as hell should. Shady importers know this, and they just play the odds. That's how they get it through, because most of the containers are never open. And when they do get caught, the feds backtrace the documents all the way back to the shipper and back to the receiving importer. And you can guess what happens then. Further investigations usually follow, with cases being referred to the proper federal authorities, and then that's when things start to get messy. In this case, the customs broker is a well-known entity called Great Luck. And before anyone starts asserting that Great Luck was a party to this or partly to blame, you have to understand their role in all of this. Great Luck is a customs broker. Great Luck relies on the claims of their customers. Customers fill out the documentation and submit it for review. That's how it goes, right? If the customers are lying about the contents of the container, Great Luck is not to blame. In this scenario, Great Luck is like DHL. If you want to import a kilo of cocaine from overseas and the feds bust you, DHL is pretty much off the hook. Why? Because they don't inspect the contents of the packages. That's not their job. They rely on the shipper's paperwork. It's not complacency, it's just the way it works. In this case, the feds inspected a container and found that the contents are essentially what they call contraband, and that raised the red flags. So the parts were seized, and here we are. Basically, it's yet again another lesson that just because you can smuggle something into the country, it doesn't make it legal. Now, everybody should be pissed about this. Everybody who cares about GTR should be pissed. Each car caught up in these stings could end up being crushed by the feds, meaning fewer cars available when these cars become legal in 2024 and driving the prices up again. And with prices of these Japanese classics going into the stratosphere already, every car that gets destroyed makes the prices on the remaining cars go even higher. It's all supply and demand, remember? So everybody should be outraged by this. Over the years, there have been so many companies bringing black market R34s, there's probably hundreds of these cars running around. A lot of them are Florida-titled, as it turns out. So, the stories of shady importers have made the automotive news websites in recent years very publicly and very interestingly. Who can forget the Rivsu debacle? Remember that one? That was a great one. Rivsu stories were all over the internet a few years ago. This Florida importer's reputation was already on the decline when they found themselves in deep financial trouble. Here's where the story gets weird. Owner Steve and Emily McCarty from Florida took on an investor named Craig Seidel, who by chance today owns a JDM car rental place in Las Vegas. He was caught up in this. Seidel was said to have loaned owner Steve McCarty $335,000 to refund customer payments on 3 R34 GTRs. After Seidel did a little more research on Rivsu, he decided that he wanted out and he wanted his money back. But by then, Steve and his wife Emily had left town. Their house was emptied and they were long gone. It seemed to happen overnight. Nobody knows where they've gone. They allegedly duped Seidel into investing with them by giving him 3 separate purchase agreements on 3 of those R34 GTRs. And these cars had already been prepaid by other customers, according to a former employee. If that's not shady, I don't know what is. According to a statement in April of 2018, Alexis Bukowski, Deputy Communications Director for the Florida Department of Highway Safety and Motor Vehicles, he basically said that the Rivsu imports dealer license had expired on April 30th, 2018, and that their location was now abandoned and they were just gone. And then on June 11th of 2018, the Florida Department of Revenue filed their own warrants against them to recover sales taxes, delinquent sales taxes, and use taxes. So they were into the government, the state government, for about $7,300. Another Florida importer that imploded in a very messy and public way was Black Ops Performance. That was a fun one. John Stagnito, who was originally from New York or New Jersey or Pennsylvania, I was call, he was the owner, and he found himself all over internet news stories by Jalopnik, The Drive, and Yahoo, and others back in, was it 2016, 2017? Stagnito had been in trouble with the law from an early age, as it turns out. He has a criminal conviction from 1987 for burglary and receiving stolen property. Oh man, I guess when you have a felony, you just opened a business. Don't recognize the name? Well, you'll recognize the story. Remember the red GTR that was confiscated at an actual car show in Florida back in 2017? Remember this? Yep, that was John Stagnita. His company, Black Ops, quickly imploded right after that happened. It all happened overnight. Now, I knew this guy personally. Let me tell you that story, how I was connected. He was referred to me by a good friend of mine as a web client because, you know, I do digital marketing. I had no idea who this guy was when I was hired to build his website. I built the Black Ops website for them back in the day. Now, there were already red flags with my business dealing with this guy, mostly because of unkept promises. It was hard to get payment out of him. It was just slow response times and all kind of stuff. Worst kind of client. I finished the website job and I basically just forgot about the guy. I didn't want to do business with him anymore, and it was done because those clients are just toxic. Then the scandal broke, and I had already cut ties with this guy before the scandal, largely because of unfulfilled commitments and poor communication and so forth, and just basic flakiness. So, the Black Ops Instagram account is still active, believe it or not, and it's now run by a former employee who I've had contact with about 2 or 3 years ago. He's been posting all kinds of stories and information and some wild allegations, which I won't even get into, but you can go and check it out for yourself and scroll through the post. You'll see a lot of information. You can come to your own conclusion, but since he's not here to defend himself, then probably not fair to talk any more about it. But out of curiosity, I want to do some more fact checking, so I checked for updates on the civil lawsuits brought against him. Public legal documents show a judgment against John recently, I think it was last year, for $79,500. And John's legal troubles with his importing businesses go back to at least 2013, where another judgment was filed for $15,000 for not delivering a car, allegedly. No word on whether or not that had been paid, but you can guess. That it probably hasn't. There appeared to be many additional victims of unkept promises, false representation, undelivered parts, undelivered cars, and so forth, and all that kind of thing. We'll have to see how those play out in court. Sometimes people who are buying illegal cars don't want to go to court to talk about it. Bottom line, Black Ops is done, and they were done in 2016. And if you see the name John Stignita associated with any new business endeavor, you'd probably be well advised to stay clear. Now, this stuff might have been going on for years, but since 2014, everybody's been on social media, so we see all this stuff. So when importers are using shady tactics or have bad business practices, word spreads fast. And unfortunately and coincidentally, most of these scandals which have come to light have been in Florida. And that's just the way it is. Remember Montu Motors, you know those guys? They found themselves under harsh scrutiny for a car that they allegedly delivered with dangerous structural damage. I saw the pictures. Some of the frame parts were covered with foam and duct tape. That's not laziness, that's just deceit, if you ask me, in my opinion. Somehow, the car passed a certified inspection in Japan. I'm going to submit that the inspector was either senile or drunk on sake. There's no way you could have missed that at that car, even if you looked underneath the car. You'd think Montu would have had the car on a lift at some point and would have spotted the issue. There was no way you could have missed it if it was on a lift. If they didn't put the car on a lift for an inspection, they suck at their job. If they did put it on an inspection and missed it, they suck at the job. In my opinion, they are either incompetent or they're just shady. Either way, there's no way I'd buy a car from those guys. And I bet everybody who looked at that article said the same thing. And this was in 2020. Guess where it happened? Yep, Florida. Sorry. I don't put these companies there. They chose to do it there. Apparently Florida is the wild, wild west again. And of course, that story was all over the internet. Another one, High Rev Motors, aka Evolution Imports, were both run by the same guy who was allegedly using fake addresses. The history of Frank, aka Francesco Modello, goes back to at least 2005, where people were leveling wild allegations on Nissan forums about unkept promises and shady business practices and all that kind of stuff. However, he seems to have gone on and is still operating today. For my research shows that Frank is now tied to Right Hand Drive Collective, and I saw no illegal cars on their website except for a black R34 that may or may not be legal, but why speculate without proof, right? Either way, enough question about how they were bringing cars is probably a good reason to give pause to potential customers. But reading all these stories, one would think that all of the shady importing is happening only in Florida. That's not the case. It's widely whispered that there are at least a couple of importers on the West Coast who have allegedly brought a car or cars into this country at one point or another. Kaizo went through an investigation a few years ago, which was very public. It ended up with a misdemeanor infraction and several cars were surrendered. After several years in court, the misdemeanor plea deal allowed several owners to get their cars back. So no felony charges, no big convictions, and anything like that. The Kaizo incident was well publicized during the early stages, but the outcome was never really given the same amount of publicity. Everybody just wants to hear the first part of the story. They don't want to hear the second part of the story, right? As for other West Coast importers who may have or have not imported cars or a car outside of the law, they seem to have been able to stay under the radar, largely because none of this has come to light. There's been no proof and there's been no seizures. There have been no stories on Jalopnik, the Drive, or anywhere else that I can find. So for now, those people are anonymous, I guess. So why does it seem that Florida is the hotspot of shady importers? It's not just about the fact that there were shady importers there. The simple fact of the matter is that Florida is the easiest place to get a car titled. As a result, many of the black market cars, no matter where they originated from or passed through to get into the United States, are registered in Florida. That's why everybody talks about Florida as the hub for this, because all these cars are running with Florida plates. How does that happen? Well, either DMV employees in Florida are mental midgets, or they just don't care. I guess there's another option. Or perhaps there's some bribery going on at the DMV. Maybe it's all happening through one DMV, right? And everybody's got the hookup. Or maybe the state is just happy to collect the registration fees and just turn a blind eye until the feds want to jump in and do something about it. But the simple fact of the matter is this: there is a hard and fast 25-year rule in the United States. If the car is not yet 25 years old, it's just not legal here, with one exemption. I'll talk about that in a minute. And I don't care what state the car was registered. State registration means nothing in the eyes of the federal government. State is here, feds are here. Just because because DHL delivers you a kilo of smuggled drugs doesn't mean that the feds won't kick in the door right after that and take you to jail. You see where I'm going? In the eyes of the federal government, these are black market cars and they cannot be made legal. And before some commenter says that you can get GTRs here under the show and display rule, that exemption applies to only 3 collectible GTRs, and most people can't afford any of those cars, but we'll talk about that in a moment. As a reminder, show or display is a special National Highway Traffic Safety Administration exemption. It's a mouthful. Basically, it allows certain approved vehicles to be imported legally to the United States without meeting federal motor vehicle safety standard requirements. The show or display exemption became effective in August of 1999, I want to say. And some of the first vehicles that were approved were the Porsche 959 and the McLaren F1. Yeah. These are the only Skylines currently eligible for import under the show and display exemption. There have been exactly 3 Nissan Skyline GTR variants on the show and display list. Here they are. Number 1 is the 1990 Nissan Skyline GTR Nismo. Number 2 was the 99 V-Spec Midnight Purple 2 car. And the number 3 is the 2002 GTR MSpec Nerd. That's it. Nothing else. That's it. That's it. And since Midnight Purple 2 cars are selling for over $300,000 right now, let's just agree that there's no way to affordably get an R34 here before 2024. And by then, even regular R34 GTRs will probably be up over $200,000. So it's a dream for many people. In addition, everybody knows about the 14 Motor X GTRs that are fully federally legal, although the number might be as high as 17 to 20, but there's no documentation on these other cars, so no one can really say for sure. Some of these owners might just be flying under the radar and hiding their cars because who knows how the feds are going to interpret the rules next week, right? So if you see an R34 GTR at a car show and it doesn't fall into either of these groups, the Motor X cars that are show and display, it's probably a black market car, meaning it's not legal even if it has a valid license plate, people. And everybody in the GTR business knows this. Yet some importers are still willing to cut corners and smuggle these cars into the country, even though they know the consequences. Maybe they're just willing to take the chance. I don't think anybody's ended up in jail for this, but who knows. These illegal importers know that if they get caught, they can cooperate with the feds and probably rat out their customers to lessen their sentence or the consequences. That's not good. Or vice versa. People who own these cars, if they get busted, they can rat out their importer, who will just declare bankruptcy and screw everyone. And then everything gets shut down and the cars start to get seized and everybody gets screwed. Meanwhile, cars are going to get seized, they're going to get sold, or maybe even crushed. We have a phrase for these cars that we use. They're called hot potatoes. The last person holding the keys when the feds come knocking gets burned, and you'll have no recourse. Who are you going to sue? An out-of-business dealer? Probably isn't licensed, bonded, and insured anyway. Unfortunately, Florida has been the hotspot of nearly all of the most conspicuous scandals and debauchery involving these GTRs. And that's unfortunate, so it's given the whole state a bad name. And unfortunately, things are about to get hotter for Florida-titled GTRs. Recently, there were some letters sent to Florida-titled GTR owners telling them to contact a specific person at the Florida Highway Patrol because their titles were being canceled. Now, it's not clear how and why the titles were canceled, basically because they're fraudulent, but you can bet that none of these cars were properly imported. So what's going to happen to those cars? Anybody's guess at this particular moment. And there are plenty of people all over the United States running around with Florida titles, including here in California, Colorado, Washington, and so forth. And my source implied that more than 300 illegal R34s have been identified and letters have gone out to or are about to go out to many of them. Now, this is a game changer. This potentially means that the house of cards is about to fall. And we've been hearing rumors about it, but maybe this is the start of it. Sooner or later, one of these owners will rat out his supplier, and an investigation will probably ensue, and it might lead to more cars being seized or surrendered by their owners to avoid more serious charges, and who knows what the final disposition of the cars are going to be. Unfortunately, this archaic 25-year-old rule is making criminals out of collectors, and it's just a horrible situation. Who's to blame? Well, first, of course, the shady importers who break the law, and they do it very publicly. And then before that, the root cause, of course, is Mercedes. Back in 1988, an initiative among German automakers led by Mercedes-Benz saw several of the German automakers come together and spend millions of dollars lobbying Congress to pass the Imported Vehicle Safety Compliance Act. Yeah, like they were caring about safety, they were caring about their profits. Because sales of gray market Benzes was hurting Mercedes, and so they leaned on our elected legislators who were always happy to take a campaign donation. This led us down the path of the restrictive anti-import laws we have today, including the ban on cars under 25 years old. Now, I think a 15-year rule would be better, and Canada has done just that. It seems to be working very well for them. But they never sold GTRs in this country, so why couldn't get them? That car should be exempt. If our government was smart, they'd charge an import duty of, say, 10 to 20% of the purchase price. Problem solved. Everybody makes money, and we're not stealing any GTR sales in Japan. It'll be interesting to see which importers get snared in the upcoming Florida title investigation, and more importantly, what will happen to the cars that will likely be seized or blacklisted from getting valid titles in the United States ever. Now, if I were an owner of one of these cars, I'd be pretty worried that I might lose it with no financial recourse, and I'd probably stick that car somewhere safe or export it. With 2024 just around the corner though, the 25-year rule will apply, and so I doubt we will be hearing much more about illegal importers, whether they're in California, Colorado, Texas, Washington, or Florida. But we'll have to see. But again, just remember, these cars are not legal, and if you buy one that's not legal and it gets seized, can't help you. So don't get stuck with a hot potato. Thanks for watching, everybody. Share this video with your friends. I appreciate it, and don't forget to subscribe. We'll see you next time.